In the face of danger, one act of bravery can change a life forever. But sometimes, not all rewards come without risk. The gas station in Atlanta, Georgia, sat under flickering fluorescent lights, a place where exhaustion and struggle met every night. It was December 2018, and for Jaden, a 12-year-old black boy, this place had become his battlefield. Life had changed after his father, Marcus, suffered a devastating injury in a factory accident, leaving him unable to work. The burden of survival had fallen onto his mother, Naomi, who took every shift she could, but the bills never stopped coming. Jaden had watched her shoulders grow heavier with each passing day. He saw the unopened envelopes on the counter, the worried glances she exchanged with his father, the way she came home too tired to speak. He knew they needed help, and he knew he had to do something about it. Desperate to contribute, Jaden took to the gas station, cleaning windshields for spare change. It was not much, but every coin felt like a victory. The work was relentless. Customers ignored him, insulted him, sometimes even shooed him away like he was nothing more than a nuisance. But he endured. He wiped away streaks of dirt with his bare hands, his small frame barely reaching the middle of some windshields. When the nights grew cold, he tucked his fingers under his shirt for warmth before moving on to the next car. Some people were kind. A few offered him a couple of dollars without question. But most weren't. Some sneered at him. Some muttered under their breath. One man even knocked the squeegee from his hands, sending it clattering to the ground. The embarrassment burned, but he picked it up and kept going. He had no choice. He could not go home empty-handed. Still, Jaden remained determined. This was his way of helping, his way of proving that he was more than just a kid waiting for life to fix itself. Each night, as he made his way back home, his feet ached from standing for hours. His hands, red and raw from gripping the squeegee, curled into fists in his pockets as he counted his earnings. Sometimes it was barely enough for a loaf of bread. Sometimes it was nothing at all. But every time he told himself that tomorrow would be better. That tomorrow someone might see him, acknowledge him, offer him more than just a dismissive glance. Then came the moment that changed everything. It happened in an instant. A sound, a sharp cry, a struggle, echoed through the gas station lot. Jaden turned, his heart pounding, as he saw something that made his blood run cold. A woman, a struggle, a moment of danger that could not be ignored. He did not think. He did not hesitate. In the face of danger, one act of bravery can change a life forever. But sometimes, not all rewards come without risk. Jaden was wiping down a windshield, his fingers numb from the cold, when the explosion shattered the night. The sound ripped through the gas station, a deafening boom that sent shockwaves through the lot. He flinched, dropping the squeegee as a sudden burst of fire erupted near one of the gas pumps. Flames leapt into the air, licking at the sky, their orange glow casting eerie shadows across the pavement. For a moment, time stood still. The world seemed frozen, trapped in a breathless second of disbelief. Then chaos erupted. People screamed. Some ran for cover. Others stood paralyzed, their eyes wide with horror. Jaden's gaze darted toward the flames where a car sat dangerously close to the growing inferno. The vehicle's tires screeched as the driver inside fought to move it. But something was wrong. The door remained shut. The figure inside didn't move. Then he heard it. "Somebody, help!" The voice was weak, desperate. Jaden squinted through the haze of smoke and flickering firelight. Inside the car, an elderly woman was trapped. She pounded on the glass with trembling hands, her face contorted in panic. Eleanor Whitmore. The name rang a bell, though Jaden didn't have time to place it. The fire was spreading. The heat was unbearable, pushing back anyone who dared get too close. The crowd hesitated, feet shuffling backward, fear taking control. Jaden didn't hesitate. He ran straight into the danger. The flames roared, crackling as they crept closer to the car. Smoke stung his eyes, burned his throat, but he didn't stop. His sneakers pounded against the pavement as he reached the driver's side door and yanked at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Eleanor's frightened eyes met his. Her lips moved, but the words didn't reach him over the roar of the fire. Jaden gritted his teeth. He had no plan, no time to think. All he knew was that he had to get her out. The fire grew hotter. The danger closed in. The metal of the car was scorching to the touch. Jaden yanked his sleeve over his hand and tried again, pulling with all his strength. The door wouldn't move. He glanced around frantically, his mind racing. There had to be a way. The fire crackled louder. Sparks shot into the air. The gas pump hissed ominously, feeding the growing inferno. People in the crowd screamed for someone to do something, but no one stepped forward. Fear paralyzed them. Jaden knew he couldn't wait any longer. He turned his attention to the passenger side window, lifting his elbow. It was the only way. He slammed his arm against the glass once. Nothing. Twice. Still nothing. Pain radiated up his arm, but he ignored it. With a final, desperate effort, he struck again. The glass shattered. A gust of heat rushed into the car as the flames edged closer. Jaden reached in, grabbing Eleanor's arm. "Come on," he yelled. She was shaking, struggling to move, but Jaden refused to let go. He pulled with all his strength, his feet sliding on the pavement as he fought against time. Finally, Eleanor lurched forward. Jaden hooked his arms under hers and dragged her out of the car, his breath ragged. They stumbled away from the vehicle just as the flames reached the gas pump. An explosion ripped through the station, sending a wave of heat and force through the air. Jaden shielded Eleanor as best as he could, collapsing to the ground beside her. The world spun. His body ached. But she was safe. And that was all that mattered. Jaden reached the car, his heart pounding as the flames crept closer. Smoke billowed around him, thick and suffocating. His eyes stung, his lungs burned, but he pushed forward. He had no time to think, no time to hesitate. Inside the car, Eleanor Whitmore was weak, her frail body trembling as she coughed violently. Her panicked eyes met Jaden's, filled with desperation. "Please, I can't move," she gasped, her voice barely audible over the roar of the fire. Jaden yanked at the car door, his fingers slipping against the hot metal. It refused to budge. His muscles ached as he pulled again, straining against the stubborn latch. Every second counted. The fire was spreading, devouring the ground beneath the car, inching toward the gas pump. His breath came in short, sharp bursts as he reached inside the shattered window. Eleanor's seatbelt was still fastened. With trembling fingers, Jaden fumbled for the buckle, his vision blurred by the smoke. His hands shook as he struggled to unfasten it, but finally, with a click, the belt released. Eleanor slumped forward. Jaden hooked his arms under hers, his small frame straining as he tried to lift her. She was fragile, but his exhaustion was catching up with him. His legs trembled as he dragged her across the seat, inch by inch. His lungs screamed for air. His skin burned from the heat. But he didn't stop. The fire inched closer. Sparks flew from the gas pump, the warning signs of imminent disaster. Jaden gritted his teeth, summoning every ounce of strength he had left. He gave one final pull, and Eleanor tumbled into his arms. He staggered backward, nearly falling himself, but he kept his balance. He spotted her wheelchair just a few feet away. With a final push, he guided her into it, his hands shaking as he locked the wheels in place. The moment he shoved her away from the car, a deafening explosion shook the ground. The gas pump erupted in flames, just inches from where they had been. Jaden stumbled, the force of the blast knocking him backward. Heat scorched his face, and for a moment his world spun. But then he heard it, the collective gasp of the crowd, the stunned silence that followed. People stood frozen, their faces a mixture of shock and awe. They had seen it all. They had watched as a boy did what grown men refused to do. Jaden took a shaky breath, turning to Eleanor. Her eyes, still wide with disbelief, glistened with something else now, gratitude. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice raw. Jaden didn't answer. He just exhaled, his body sagging with exhaustion. For the first time that night he realized what he had just done, and for the first time he understood what real bravery felt like. What's the bravest thing you've ever done? Let's hear it. The next morning, the quiet hum of the neighborhood was interrupted by the low rumble of an expensive engine. A sleek black car pulled up outside Jaden's small apartment complex, its polished surface gleaming under the sun. The vehicle stood out against the cracked pavement and worn-out buildings, a stark contrast to the world Jaden knew. From the back seat, a tall, well-dressed man stepped out. His presence commanded attention. Victor Whitmore, Eleanor Whitmore's son, a powerful millionaire with a name that carried weight in the city, adjusted his cufflinks before making his way to the door. Inside, Jaden sat at the small kitchen table, still groggy from the night before. His body ached from the rescue, every muscle sore, but the events of the previous night replayed in his mind like a movie. The fire, the explosion, the look in Eleanor's eyes, none of it felt real. His fingers absently traced the rough edges of the table as he tried to shake the strange weight pressing on his chest. A sharp knock echoed through the apartment. Naomi, Jaden's mother, wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked to the door, confusion knitting her brows. She had not been expecting visitors. She opened the door to find Victor standing there, his expression unreadable. Naomi hesitated, glancing at the expensive car behind him. "Can I help you?" Victor didn't waste time. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crisp envelope, extending it toward her. "Your son saved my mother's life. This is yours." Naomi took the envelope cautiously, her fingers trembling as she opened it. The sight inside made her breath hitch. A check for $1 million. Jaden, who had moved to the doorway, froze. His stomach twisted, his breath caught in his throat. $1 million. Victor's cold gaze lingered on Jaden. His lips curled into something that was supposed to be a smile, but it lacked warmth. "You're a brave kid. You did what no one else would. Consider this my way of saying thank you." Jaden's hands clenched into fists. Something about this felt off. The way Victor looked at him, the way his voice carried an edge beneath the polished words. It wasn't just gratitude. There was something more. Naomi swallowed hard, her eyes darting between the check and Victor. "I don't know what to say. This is life-changing." Victor nodded, but his eyes never left Jaden. "Think it over. But understand, this isn't charity. It's payment." Jaden's heart pounded in his chest. Payment for what? His mother's fingers tightened around the envelope as if afraid it would disappear. The sheer amount written on the check was unfathomable. It could erase their struggles, pay for his father's medical bills, give them a future they had only dreamed about. But why did it feel like there was more to this than what was being said? Victor shifted slightly, his gaze unwavering. "I'll expect an answer soon. Don't take too long." The words lingered in the air like smoke, filling the small space with an unseen tension. Naomi glanced at Jaden, searching his face for any sign of what to do, but he couldn't move. He couldn't speak. Victor stepped back toward his car, pausing before opening the door. "And Jaden?" Jaden swallowed, his throat dry. "Yeah?" Victor's eyes darkened just slightly, his voice calm but firm. "Be careful who you trust." Jaden stood frozen as the car door shut and the engine purred to life. The sleek vehicle pulled away, disappearing down the street, leaving behind only questions. Something told him this was only the beginning. Would you accept the money without question? Why or why not? Let's discuss. Jaden soon realized that the money came with strings attached. At first, Victor Whitmore's generosity seemed like an incredible gift, a miracle that could change everything for his struggling family. But as the days passed, Jaden couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his gut. Something wasn't right. The way Victor looked at him, the way he spoke, it wasn't just gratitude. There was something deeper, something unspoken. A week later, the same sleek black car returned. This time, Victor himself didn't step out. Instead, his driver handed Jaden an invitation, an elegant embossed card with gold lettering. "Mr. Whitmore would like to see you at his estate," the driver said. "He has bigger plans for you." Jaden hesitated. Bigger plans? He wasn't sure what that meant, but he had no time to dwell on it. At the gas station, Gus, the elderly attendant who had taken Jaden under his wing, watched him quietly as he read the invitation. The old man had worked that station for decades, had seen more than his fair share of trouble. "Be careful, kid," Gus murmured, his voice heavy with warning. "That man doesn't give without taking. People like him, they don't do favors for free." Jaden nodded slowly, pocketing the invitation. He had already suspected as much, but hearing Gus say it out loud only made the knot in his stomach tighten. 2 days later, Jaden found himself inside Victor's sprawling estate. The sheer size of the mansion made his apartment feel even smaller than it already was. Marble floors gleamed under massive chandeliers, and large paintings hung on the walls, their subjects staring down at him as if they knew why he was here. Victor welcomed him with a warm smile, but something about it felt forced. "Jaden, my boy," he said smoothly, leading him into an opulent sitting room. "I wanted to personally thank you for saving my mother's life. But I also wanted to offer you an opportunity." Before Jaden could respond, another man entered the room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his expression was unreadable. "This is Dante," Victor introduced. "He's an associate of mine. He has something for you." Dante held out a sleek, black briefcase. "All I need you to do is deliver this. Simple job. No questions asked." Jaden's fingers hovered over the case. Every instinct in him screamed that this was wrong. "What's inside?" he asked. Victor's smile didn't waver. "Don't worry about that." Jaden pulled his hand back. "I can't do this." For a brief second, the room fell silent. Victor's expression darkened and Dante's grip on the briefcase tightened. Jaden realized something in that moment. He was in too deep, and walking away wouldn't be easy. Jaden knew he had to get out before it was too late. The weight of Victor Whitmore's offer pressed down on him like a vice, suffocating and inescapable. The moment he had refused to deliver the briefcase, the air in the room had shifted. Victor's polite demeanor had hardened, and Dante's watchful eyes had become something more threatening. Jaden could feel it. He had crossed a line, and now he was in danger. He ran. He didn't know where to go, but his instincts screamed for him to find Gus. The gas station was nearly empty when he arrived, the hum of flickering neon lights buzzing overhead. Gus stood behind the counter, wiping down a coffee pot as if it were any other night. But when he looked up and saw Jaden's face, his expression darkened. "Kid," Gus said, setting the pot down. "What did you do?" Jaden, still catching his breath, shook his head. "I didn't take the job. But now they're after me." Gus sighed heavily, rubbing a hand over his weathered face. He glanced toward the street, his gaze lingering on the shadows stretching across the pavement. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "Listen to me, Jaden. You leave town. Now, don't pack a bag, don't say goodbye, just go." Jaden's stomach twisted. "But my mom—" "She'll be safer if they don't know where you are," Gus interrupted. "You stay here, they'll use her to get to you. You gotta disappear." Before Jaden could respond, the sound of screeching tires ripped through the night air. Headlights flooded the gas station lot, and the black car Jaden knew all too well pulled in fast. Doors slammed. Victor's men stepped out, their figures silhouetted against the neon glow. Gus grabbed Jaden's shoulder, forcing him toward the back exit. "Go, kid, now!" Jaden's feet barely touched the ground as he sprinted through the alleyway, his heart pounding like a war drum. Behind him he heard Gus step forward, his voice gruff but steady. "Hey, you looking for someone?" Then chaos, a scuffle, the sounds of fists meeting flesh, a muffled grunt of pain. Jaden didn't look back. He couldn't. Tears streamed down his face as he disappeared into the night, alone and afraid. The only family he had left behind was his mother. And now, Gus. And he wasn't sure if he'd ever see them again. Jaden found himself far from home, in a place where no one knew his name. The city around him was unfamiliar, the towering buildings casting long shadows that made him feel even smaller. The weight of what he had left behind pressed on his chest like an anchor. But he had no choice. He had to keep moving. He had to survive. The streets were colder here. The people walked past him without a second glance, wrapped in their own lives, unaware of the boy who had lost everything overnight. He had nothing but the clothes on his back, a few crumpled dollars in his pocket, and the determination to make it through another day. He spent nights in shelters, sometimes sleeping on park benches when they were full. He learned how to blend in, how to move without drawing attention. He kept his head down, his ears open. He listened, watched, and learned. The world had been cruel, but it had also made him sharper. In the quiet moments, he thought of his mother, of Gus. He didn't know what had happened after he ran. He didn't know if Gus had made it out, if his mother was safe. The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't go back. Not yet. Someday he would return. Someday he would make things right. He clung to that thought like a lifeline. He would find a way to build himself up, to be strong enough to fight back when the time came. Victor Whitmore and his men thought they had won, but Jaden refused to be just another casualty in their game. One evening, as he sat on a bench overlooking the city, he whispered the words to himself as if saying them out loud would make them real. "I never wanted the money. I just wanted a better life." And that life wasn't over yet. His story wasn't finished. This was only the beginning.